Hello, welcome to Smart Sex, Smart Love, where talking about sex goes beyond the taboo and talking about love goes beyond the honeymoon. My guest today is Adam Zmith, a writer and podcast producer whose work focuses on sex, queer identity, LGBTQ plus lives, history, art, and desire. He's the author of Soulmates, A History of Our Fetish for Feet, and Deep Sniff, A History of Poppers and Queer Futures, which won the Polari First Book Prize in 2022. Adam's work has won numerous British podcast awards, including Podcast of the Year in 2024 and Best Sex and Relationships Podcast for the series Press, Play, Turn On. He also won the Best New Podcast Gold Award in 2024. Adam hosts the weekly podcast Free Sex and is co-director of the podcast production company Aunt Nell, which makes mostly documentaries. In 2022, he wrote and produced The Film We Can't See for the BBC. He describes himself as a promiscuous writer and producer who loves wonderful ways that queer artists create new worlds for us all. Today, Adam is going to talk about our fetish for feet and other pleasures. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you, Joe. It's great to be here.
Thank you. It's so glad to have you here, and it's a great resume. You've done a lot of good stuff.
Yes, it's funny when you hear someone read all that back to you.
I know. It's great, actually.
Like, I am tired.
Right, and you're a young guy, too, to be have done all this. And the way I came across you was your book, Soulmates, and I just loved it. I thought it was really thorough, really well-researched, and really accessible. And so I thought, I've got to have you on here, and let's talk about it.
Great. Let's talk about it.
All right. So why did you write it, Soulmates? And why did you write it about foot fetishes? What is it? Why?
Well, you know what? I have a foot fetish, and that's interesting to me. And I figured that it would be interesting to other people. And I think that I wouldn't have written it if I hadn't already written a book about poppers, which was Deep Sniff. I wrote that first and really, really enjoyed writing that. And then that was my first book. And then going like out on the road and talking about it and sharing it in bookshops, in talks, on panels, and sometimes in nightlife spaces as well. Like I do quite a bit of work, like performing my work or like doing things that are mixed, performance and reading, literature and stuff like that. And so I kind of met a lot of people who really engaged with that book about poppers, and they would like basically just tell me their stories about poppers. So that was great. That was fun. And it was really just pleasing to me as a writer to have that. So then I thought, how can I get that again? What was it about the poppers one that made that work? And why did I enjoy that? And why did people engage with it? And it was because, well, I like poppers and it's interesting to me, the history. So then I thought, what else is there that would meet that bar? And for me, it was the obvious answer was feet, because I also really like feet. And I thought it would be fun to write. And then it would be fun to like go out on the road and have those conversations again and do podcasts as well like this. So that was, I think that was why I did it. And then I guess the second thing is just because feet are a big part of our erotic interests and our history of desire, really. But similarly with poppers, like not that many people know very much about that. So there was a kind of journalistic thing there of like, there's something to find out here.
Now, those are going to be listeners here that don't know what poppers are. What are they? Can you just briefly describe them?
Yes, of course. Poppers is the sort of like slang name or the street name for a group of chemicals, which are alkyl nitrites. That's the family. And then there are different substances within that, like amyl nitrite being the most famous. And it's a liquid that you buy in a little brown bottle, which is not sold to you for human consumption in places like the US and the UK. It's often sold as leather cleaner, but you don't need to clean your leather with it. The reason why people buy it from sex shops is that they sniff the vapor that's rising from the liquid from the bottle. They don't touch the liquid or drink the liquid. And it gives you a little high and it relaxes your muscles and it disinhibits you. And it's and it lasts for like a minute or two. So it's a quick, cheap, legal, mostly legal high. And it's really good during sex. And it's often, it's been a big part of like gay sex for decades, for a century, really. Yeah.
How did you get comfortable? Because people, I get a lot of clients as a sex therapist, right, who have a foot fetish, and they struggle revealing it to me, revealing it to partners. Here you are talking about it publicly, filming it, the whole thing with me. How did you get comfortable talking about your own fetish?
I don't know. It took a long time. I mean, everything's taken a long time for me. I didn't have sex until I was 29, So, I think, it took a long time. I have to think about things a lot, and I have to explore things intellectually a lot before I get comfortable with things. That is easier now, the older I get. But with feet, I think it was just the more sexual partners I had, and the more that I just tried to say your feet are really hot. Can I play with them? And I didn't really have any bad reactions. You get some guys who are neutral on it, or they're like, well, I'm not really into that, that kind of thing. But just talking gently and finding people for whom it would be okay, they might not be into it, but they're into the way that I'm into it, So just basically finding good communicative sexual partners to do that with. And then that just helped me to feel more comfortable with it myself, I guess. And then I guess, again, going back to talking about poppers, I mean, there's, in Deep Sniff, there's literally a chapter which is about me wanking. So, I guess going through that experience and writing about that and then putting that out there in the world just made me think okay, well, I can also write the thing about feet and talk about feet. And in a way, as a writer, you'll know this, sometimes you just kind of have to say, I have to do this. This is the subject that interests me, and I've got to have something to write about. And this is it because it interests me.
Yes. All of my stuff is pretty niche because those are my interests. Right. And I've always wanted to be more popular or more successful than I kind of am. Right. But then people say, well, then write about more popular. But I don't care about the more popular stuff. I care about the things that I care about, which are the niche things. So it's kind of like yours.
But it's also what's interesting about Soulmates in this book was how when I was working on the proposal, talking about it with my agent, talking about it with editors who work for publishing companies, and sending around a proposal, the original idea was a much deeper, longer book. And part of the proposal said, around about 1 in 6 or 1 in 7 people have fantasized about feet. This is not a rare phenomenon. And it's also pretty well represented in media. Often, I mean, well, in terms of volume, people know that this is a fetish that people have. It's not a secret thing that people don't know. Often it's represented in a negative way or a shaming way, right? Which is a problem. But nevertheless, it's kind of there and it's quite common. And it's not even that controversial. But yet a lot of publishers, well, all but one, said, this is too niche a topic. We're not going to publish a book on this. It's too niche. That's pretty much what all the ones who rejected it said. And then actually one publisher said, actually, it's too mainstream. So I don't know, whatever. I found the one publisher that was just we are so into this, let's go.
Yeah. That reminds me of my book. I wrote a book about straight men who have sex with men. Mm-hmm. They're not gay. They're not bi. That's a whole other topic. But no, first of all, in 2008, I could get no publisher. I had an agent and everything. Finally, in 2014, I found one. Only one would be willing to talk. Some of these publishers, it's whatever. It's whatever was going to sell more,
Yeah, which I get it. They got to be sure of an audience. I mean, it's really hard to make an audience and to make money out of and even cover the costs in book publishing.
Right. All right. So what does your book reveal about our fetish for feet?
It reveals the fact that as long as we've been having sex, we've had a fetish for feet. As long as we've been making pictures, drawing pictures of each other, we've been drawing our feet, obviously, because they're a part of our body, but we've also represented the feet in erotic pleasure. And this is true in lots of different cultures over lots of different times. And there are entire cultural practices foot binding in China, which was going on for a millennium. And that is very much about control and power and domination and maintaining a gender difference, but it is also an erotic practice, and was. And so that is just a big kind of just a big area to explore. And then also in the Bible, you've got Jesus washing his disciples' feet, which I say you can't separate out the love that he's showing there in that story from other kinds of love. Like it's just a way that he's showing his humility and his love for his brothers, basically, which is hot to me because it's kind of homoerotic, right? But it's also about showing love, and feet are a thing which can help us to do that for each other. So those are just two examples. But apart from that, there are like out and out erotic things. You know, there's pictures and drawings and cartoons and everything from lots of different places where people are like sucking toes, and poems from the Middle Ages, you know, love poems to feet. And so it just revealed that our fetish has been there for a really long time. That was kind of number one. Another thing that it revealed was just how our desire for feet became like a shameable desire. And I think that for me anyway, and I make the argument in the book that like that came from a lot of the early sexology that was going on in the late 19th century, and then some early psychoanalysis in the 20th century of how and I'm interested in your take on this point, but how a lot of sexual practices were classified as deviant or as abnormal. Even when they were not shamed, they were classified as like aberrant in some way, different in some way from the normal thing, which I guess is penis in vagina, right? And so I think that if you track through sexology and psychoanalysis, there is this like creation that there is a shame around it. And I think that that's what we're all still living with today. I think things are changing a little bit, especially around feet. But that was just another thing that was interesting to me.
I agree. And I also think things are changing around kink, right? And people understanding that it's not just because people want to think of intercourse as the main event, right? It's foreplay and afterplay. And I think that's why a lot of these psychologists, these early psychologists that you talk about and sexologists, you know, decided this was abhorrent and something deviant and unusual because the prize was the PIV sex, right?
Yeah.
But that's not the case for some people. Some people feet is the main event.
Right. And I mean, I think Freud is a really interesting one here, you know, because Sigmund Freud, by the time that he did address fetishes and including feet, he had developed his whole theory around the Oedipus complex and about it was very much centered on like, what do young developing men fancy and why do they fancy the things that they fancy? And, you know, he comes up with the Oedipus complex of like, you know, seeing that he's got a penis, his mother doesn't have a penis, and that scares him, and then his dad does have a penis, and there's the jealousy of the dad, and then the whole thing. And like, regardless of like whether you put stock in that theory or not, when he had that theory, so then when he came to write about fetishes and specifically feet, he was like, how do I fit this into my overarching theory? And then, well, the foot is just a substitute for the penis. That's what it has to be, because everything's penis-centric in my world. Yes. So the foot has to be a penis. And I'm like, well, you know what, Sigmund? Like, I don't need the foot to be a substitute for the penis because I have sex with people with penises. Like, I can play with the penis as well, and also enjoy the foot because it's a foot, and I fancy feet. That's it. Like,
I love it. It's that simple.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, far be it for me to like criticize Freud as an overthinker, because I am a pretty big overthinker myself and a deep thinker and like coming up with theories and analyses and stuff like that. And I think that's a valid exercise. But it was just funny to me that he stretched so hard to make the foot into a substitute penis.
Mm-hmm. I do know that some people have such a strong foot fetish, they'd rather get a foot pic than a dick pic. So
there you go. Some people want a foot in the ass, you know?
That's right. Isn't foot fetish up there one of the top fetishes that are Googled?
Yeah, definitely. It's really high up there. It's up there with like with group sex, with threesomes, with really commonly like racialized, fetishized bodies and practices, which can be really quite common. It's really, really high up there. And also there's been in recent years this like outpouring of foot content because it's a relatively quote unquote like safe kind of content in the sense that, first of all, like lots of people can like take videos and photos of their feet and put them out there, and they're not identifiable because their face aren't in them. So people are selling it that way. And also it doesn't contravene any community guidelines because there's no genitals. So you can even, there's entire, there's an entire ecosystem of Instagram, which is sock pics and foot pics and trainers and stuff like that. And it's basically, sex content, right? I mean, we can debate what sex is, but it's basically sex content. It's basically porn for the people who like that stuff, but it doesn't contravene the quite strict guidelines that Instagram has and other platforms as well. So there's been this outpouring of content as well.
I know when people look at that and say, what's sexual about that? Well, it might not be for you because you're not into feet, but for people who are, right? And then some people, it's so many different, right? Like you said, the trainers, the socks, some people just want to look at a foot. Sometimes it has to be attached to the person. So you got to be seeing it, everybody's got their own specific thing around it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's that's another thing that's, I hope, conveyed in the book is like, it's a whole universe of pleasure, really. And just in the same way that people have different types, like they're like an ass person or a tit person or like a blonde or brunette person, whatever it is. Like it's the same with feet.
Totally. Right? Some people.
Totally. Yes.
Right. All right. So, did you notice a difference between heterosexual and homosexual interest in feet, or was there not that part of your book?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I can't remember if it's in the book. It's not like a full part of the book or anything, but it might be mentioned that there is definitely like the people. There is some research that that basically men who have sex with men, gay, and I think specifically identify as gay men or bi men, they are like the most likely category to declare a fetish for feet. And then it's like straight men, and then it's queer women, and then it's straight women. So there's kind of a gender difference going on there, at least in terms of like people declaring themselves to surveys. And, that's kind of all that we have there. And definitely, I just noticed from my own world, my own practices, that that lots of gay and bi men like playing with feet. That's true. And there are lots of different dynamics in that. And sometimes that can be like relatively vanilla, but sometimes it can be a bit like dominant and submissive. But when it comes to like men and women playing with feet, it's very common that the man is a submissive, that it's a dominant submissive dynamic, and that the man is a submissive and the woman is a dominant. And so that's another interesting I guess like phenomenon really, is that there is a difference there in terms of the sexualities and the genders.
Right. The foot is like a form of dominance or humiliation. And I totally agree that you see more straight or women doing it to men, where men are the submissive. There are videos and there is stuff out there about men doing it to women, but it's much less.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in the world where it's a female dominant and a male submissive, the shoes are often very prominent, like high heels, leather boots. These are like classical images. A man like wants this really strong, powerful and painful stiletto heel to be like completely dominating him, and he's on the floor and his dominatrix, his mistress, is over him, or he wants to just like worship her. He wants to like lick those boots. Maybe if she lets him, he wants to remove the boots and lick and worship her feet.
Right, and often the heel is used as almost like a penis, right? Where he's forced to suck it.
Yeah,
fellatio almost.
Yeah, and the toes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now, one of the things is, and then I want to ask you some other questions, but this is so close to the whole financial domination scene.
Yeah,
the poppers and the feet. Did you know together?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know so much about financial domination except the basics of it. That there is just this explosion of activity over the past couple of years, really, the past few years, where people are the fin dom, the dominant person, and they're basically forcing their submissive to like send them money. And then it's not so much that they're like performing. It's not so much that the dominant then performs a service for that money, like a dance or something. It's like the performance is the performance of being dominant, and like I deserve this money because you're my submissive, and you do not deserve to have that money. You deserve to send that money to me because you're pathetic, and that money should be with me.
You're below my feet. You're below my feet.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
So the
also,
money is the rope.
yes.
It's ESM without rope.
It is. That's right. And I mean, I think that there's a lot of people who are like thinking like, hey, this is great. I can like get rich doing this and I don't have to work. And there are some people who are, I mean, it is work. It's sex work for those people who are doing it as work. And there are lots of people who, I'm sure there are lots of people who are like really successful at it. But I also think there's probably a lot of people who are just like having a go and it it being like kind of not really working for them. But I don't know.
Right.
But good for them for trying. And like, it's interesting. Like, is it like, it's one of those things in sex where it's like, how much of this is performance and how much of it is like a sexual act, and the performance of it becomes a sexual act, you know?
Yes. And I've noticed with my clients, the straight clients and the gay clients, it gives them access to each other, gay men with straight men, because you're just touching their feet. You're just worshiping their feet. You're giving them money. So you're being sexual with a straight guy without having to touch genitals or have anal sex.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, there is, I interviewed a guy when I was doing research about his experience of basically finding guys on Instagram who pose pictures, straight guys who post pictures of themselves after football with their football socks and football trainers. And then he DMs them and says, like, how much do you want? I really want those socks. How much, you know, don't clean them. Please send them to me. How much do you want for them? And these guys wrap them in plastic and send them. And I don't know with those straight guys, whether they are like straight guys just living their life, like posting pictures on Instagram. And occasionally there's their feet or their sock in them, and how much of them are like, I know that there are gay guys who are going to want to buy these socks from me. So like, this is like my persona on Instagram. And I'm not even straight actually, like, but they don't need to know that, you know?
Right. All right. So let's talk about your free sex podcast. What's your intention with it, and tell us about it?
Well, I want to build a world where everyone can have the sex that they want, basically, because I just feel like we're all held back from sex in lots of different ways. I held myself back for 29, well, until I was 29. Well, I say held myself back. There are other people to blame for that, including like government policies and culture and some things to do with my parents and other things around me. And then, you know, since I've been having sex, there are other things that occasionally hold me back from sex. Like I might get an STI and then I have to get it treated. And fortunately, I'm in a place where I can get it treated and for me to have my sexual health. But then there's a period where I can't have sex because of that. And, you know, these are quite simple, basic bacterial infections like gonorrhea. And we do not yet have a vaccine for something like that. And I wonder why we came up with a vaccine in, you know, kind of overnight for COVID, not literally overnight, but overnight in the terms of how long it normally takes to develop a vaccine. We were like, this is a top priority. We got to do this. And we were right to do that. But, you know, we've had gonorrhea for hundreds and hundreds of years, and we still don't have the vaccine. There are some technical difficulties, but anyway, the fact is, I just think that reveals what our priorities are in terms of our health and how sexual health is in there. So that's another thing that holds us back. So what I wanted to do with the podcast was interview a different person every week who has a different idea for how we can build that world of free sex. And some of them are people talking about, we need all of the vaccines for all the STIs. And some of them talking about we need to massively de-shame everyone. And we do that through better sex education. And some of them talk about we need more easier licensing laws for venues where people can have sex. You know, I live in London. There's a pub on every street corner. There's a pub for every night of the week if you want, because alcohol is a thing that we do. And just going to the pub is a thing that we do regularly. And it's just a part of our culture, and we do it openly. Like there's not a sex club on every street corner. And in fact, they're really quite limited in number because of licensing and things like that. So some people say we need to change that regulatory system so that more people can have more sex that they want, you know? So that's really what the podcast is. It's trying to collect a different idea every week on how we can build that world.
I'm with you 100% with that. What are some of the challenges you face writing about sex and working as an independent writer and producer?
Oh, well, it's quite hard sometimes to, I think, like build an audience for something when you're doing the kind of stuff that I do, which is like, I think you can build I think it's easier to build an audience for something where you're talking about the sex itself, like a podcast where people share their sex stories and their gossip, or where they're talking about how to do it. Like there's we're both part of the sex podcast ecosystem, and there's a lot bigger podcasts than ours. I mean, yours is like definitely way bigger than mine. Like, but there's ones really, really big ones, which are kind of like people talking about the sex that they have, and people talking about like sex tips and stuff. Whereas if you're talking about sex in a way that you might talk about it, or I might talk about it in this quite like, hopefully like thoughtful way, and also engaging in politics and society and religion and like ideas, then I think that's quite that just seems to be like quite niche, I guess, even though it shouldn't be, because we're talking about a thing that like almost everyone does or wants to do. So I think that's one thing. Another thing is censorship. Like I don't make a lot of visual work, but I know a lot of artists and makers that make visual work, and it's really hard for them to build an audience online when Instagram is where it's at, but their work is censored because it's got some genitals in it. And it might not even be like quote unquote pornography. It might just have like nudity and stuff like that. So that's quite hard. And then I think the other thing is, just as a writer, well, I guess, podcast producer as well. Like, it's hard to get, unless you have a really, really big audience, and unless you make a lot of money, it's hard to buy yourself the time to do the writing. I don't have any other kind of job. I do lots of different jobs that are all in this kind of area. I give talks, I write things, I make podcasts, I produce other people's podcasts, I do audio editing, and I get grants and funding by myself or with other people, but it's always a bit of a slog being independent when you don't have enough people that want to directly buy the thing that you want to sell. Yes, people are directly buying the book. The percentage is really low, which is an industry thing. It's nothing to do with me, but it's an industry thing, like in terms of how much percentage I get when you buy a book. Basically, I guess what I'm saying is the summary of what I'm saying there is the market doesn't value this work enough.
I agree with that. What are you working on now? And I heard that you're working on a musical.
Yes, it's true. I am working on a musical. There is a queer bookshop in London that's been going since 1979. It's called Gaze the Word. It's an amazing place. It's like the oldest LGBTQ plus bookshop in the UK. Nearly the world, maybe. And in 1984, it was subject to a censorship raid where customs officers used a very old Victorian law to try to stop this bookshop from importing gay and lesbian books from outside the country so that they could sell them to queer people in the UK. And so they tried to stop that. The bookshop fought back, the community fought back, and the case was dropped eventually. And so this was like a huge victory for censorship in the UK, a huge victory against censorship in the UK, and a huge victory for freedom of expression, and specifically like queer artistic expression and books. And so me and a bunch of other people think it makes for a really good musical, also because the customs officers are quite hapless, and it's quite fun to make kind of like government state agents quite hapless and camp in a musical. And also it's about a bunch of booksellers who were kind of at each other's throats, arguing about politics and whether this book was feminist enough and that book was anti-religious enough, before the state kind of clamped down on them. So it's quite a fun story. There's a bunch of amazing people who are the real people. Our characters are based on the real people. And we're just working on it now. It's another thing that's going to take some time to build and get a full production on in London, and then hopefully a tour later on. But it's pretty exciting and fun.
Well, you have a lot of energy and a lot of great ideas, and you're smart. And really, the book was great. I'm so glad I found it and found you. What else would you want everyone to know before we come to an end that we didn't share about you? Oh,
about me. I like a glass of whiskey. If anyone sees me out and about, buy me a glass of whiskey, or if it's the daytime, a coffee. with a sugar-free caramel shot. And I guess people can find me at my website, which is adamzmith.com. It's like Smith, but with a Z. So you say it like Zmith. And I just kind of made that up because my name is too generic otherwise. And it's fun to say Zmith with a Z. And that's where they can find me.
Thank you. Adam, thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you on my show.
Thank you, Joe. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I really appreciate it.
All right. And those of you that are listening, you can hear more of my podcast at smartsexsmartlove.com. And you also can follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. My handle is at Dr. Joe Kort, DrJoeKort, or you can go to my website, joekort.com. Thanks for listening and stay healthy and happy, and we'll see you next time.